So I want to ask you something. What if the binary was never the truth? What if Source, the intelligence behind everything, the force that breathes the universe into being, was never male or female, never gay or straight, never any single fixed thing at all? What if it was always everything all at once? And what if the most radical spiritual act available to any of us right now is simply accepting that? That's what this episode is about. Let's start with the theology of fluidity. The version of God most of us inherited came with a gender, a set of preferences, and a very specific list of who was acceptable and who was not. But that version of God was not handed down from Source. It was constructed by people, with power, with agendas, with very human fears about things they couldn't control. The mystics told a different story. In Kabbalah, the Ein Sof, the infinite Source, has no gender, no form, no boundary. It is described as the limitless, the without end. In Hermetic tradition, the divine is understood as both masculine and feminine simultaneously, the sacred androgyne, the union of all polarities within one infinite field. Even within the Christian mystical tradition, the tradition most of us were handed, the original understanding of God was not a man on a throne. It was a presence, a breath, a field of pure being that permeated everything equally. The word used for the Spirit of God moving over the waters in Genesis, ruach, is feminine in Hebrew. The wisdom of God throughout Proverbs, Sophia, is feminine. The divine has always been both and neither. That was never hidden. It was just inconvenient for systems built on control. So when the religious right says that certain expressions of love or identity are not natural, they're not quoting Source. They are quoting fear. Which brings us to the science of non-binary reality. Here's what science tells us about the nature of reality. In quantum physics, a particle exists in multiple states simultaneously until the moment it is observed. This is called superposition. Before observation, before the binary of this or that, here or there, one thing or another, everything exists as infinite possibility. Nature itself does not operate in binaries. Gender exists on a spectrum in virtually every species on Earth. Over 500 species exhibit what we would call same-sex behavior. Light is simultaneously a wave and a particle. Two things at once that should be mutually exclusive and yet are not. The universe is demonstrably, measurably, scientifically non-binary, which means when someone tells you that your expression of love, your identity, your way of moving through the world is unnatural, they are not just wrong theologically, they are wrong scientifically. Source cannot be one fixed thing. The universe it created refuses to be one fixed thing, and neither should you. As for me personally, I want to tell you something I haven't really expanded on fully on this channel before. I spent years praying to be different, not praying for guidance, not praying for wisdom, not praying for love, praying to be fixed. Because I was taught that how I am, who I love, where my heart goes naturally, was wrong. It was sin, was unnatural. And I believed it for a long time. There were relationships where I withheld myself completely, where I refused to be fully present with the person I loved, because I thought the expression of that love was something I needed to protect God from. I look back at that now and my heart breaks for the person that I was. Not because I was foolish, but because I was sincere. I was genuinely trying to be good. And what I know now, and what I know in every cell, is that the only thing even close to sin in any of that was the denial. Denying the life Source gave me. Withholding the love Source moved through me. Shrinking the expression Source designed within me. That was the only loss. Years ago, I had a near-death experience. I won't say much about the circumstances, but only that I found myself moving through a path of light. Afraid at first, afraid to leave my husband Theo, afraid to leave my closest friend, afraid to leave this life. And then reality, everything I had known, condensed into a single point of light. And in that darkness that followed, I found myself moving through my own life, looking for the place that I most wanted to return to, where I felt most happy or complete. So I came back. And when I did, I remembered something. It was a phrase, a knowing, something that felt older than this lifetime, something I had known as a child, something that felt like it came from before recognizable memory. I can't fully reconstruct it now, but it had a cadence, almost poetic, almost melodic. And saying it again in that moment brought me to tears. Because I knew that it wasn't new information. It was a remembrance of something. And I didn't fully understand what that experience was pointing me toward until years later, when I had what I call my sunrise download. Last summer, I was at a party in the Hollywood Hills with Theo. It was a big gay party. And I was tired. I was ready to leave. I was sitting on a lounge chair overlooking the city as the sun began to rise. And as the sun broke on the horizon on a clear morning with just a few soft clouds, there was a flash of light that moved across the entire skyline. And in that flash, there was a rainbow luminescence that lit up every shadow, every cloud, every shaded edge of the city. And when I blinked, it flashed again. And in that second flash, I saw something, like a shape. It was like a sound wave, but vertical, with the sun at its peak and extending downward. And something landed in my chest in that moment that I can only describe as a download. That rainbow luminescence wasn't a thought, not a conclusion I reasoned my way to. Just a knowing that my life experience of being gay is divine because I am divine. And I am perfect exactly as I am. Not despite this, not in spite of how I was made, but because of it, through it, as it. Source wasn't telling me that being gay was acceptable. Source was reminding me that it was never a question. That this lens, this particular way of experiencing love and moving through the world was one of the infinite ways Source chooses to know itself. Through me, as me. And for the first time in my entire life, I believed it. But I want to be honest with you about something else. Because leaving one space that couldn't hold me didn't mean I immediately found one that could. I spent years in religious community hiding who or how I loved. And then, perhaps out of a desire to replace one community with some semblance of another, I spent years in the gay community, not openly honest with regard to my spiritual life. Two different worlds, two different versions of myself I was allowed to show. And in neither one was I ever fully free to just be all of it all at once. The church couldn't hold my full self, and so many spaces in the gay community couldn't hold my spirituality. And I know I'm not alone in that. There are so many of us living in the space between. Too spiritual for one world, too gay for another, too something for every room we walk into. And I want to say directly to those people that in-between space is not a mistake. It is not evidence that you don't belong anywhere. It is evidence that you are big enough that no single container was ever going to hold you in the first place. Source doesn't fit in a container either. Maybe that's why you don't. This led me to the oneness conclusion. Here's the truth I want you to hold after this episode. Source is not male or female, not gay or straight, not cis or trans or any other category we have created to understand ourselves. Source is all of those things, and none of those things simultaneously. Because every single one of those expressions, every identity, every orientation, every way a soul chooses to incarnate and experience love is Source dividing itself to know itself through every particular lens. When you look at someone whose expression of love or identity is different from yours, you are not looking at an other. You are looking at another facet of the same Source looking back at you. Did you get that? Let that sink in a bit. This is what the religious right gets most catastrophically wrong. They think defending a binary God is an act of faith, but it is actually a profound limitation of the infinite. You cannot put source in a binary. You cannot put the universe in a category, and you cannot tell a soul how source is allowed to move through them. They are source, and so are you. The most natural thing I have ever felt is exactly who I am. And I spent decades being told that that wasn't natural. But I always came back to the same knowing. How could this not be natural if this is instinctually where I go? It is natural. It is source. It is sacred, and it always was. So here's an invitation. If you are watching this and you have been told that who you are is wrong, I want to look you in the eye and tell you something I needed someone to tell me for decades. You were never the problem. The container was. The God who required your smallness was never God at all. The source that breathed you into being has never once looked at you and seen a mistake. You are not a deviation from the divine plan. You are an expression of it, a specific, irreplaceable, necessary expression of source, knowing itself through your particular lens. And this reclamation, this remembering of who you actually are, is not rebellion. It is not rejection of faith. It is the deepest act of faith available to you, trusting that source made you right. That love flowing through you is love. That the divine is fluid enough to hold all of it, all of you, every part, every expression, every love. This is reclamation, and you are doing it beautifully. And if this resonated with you, please hit like, subscribe, and follow along. Join the conversation and help me wake people up to a new understanding of source energy, of love, and how we all have it already within us. I love you.